Morning, all. All right, so 4 games tonight in the NHL, so I'm combining the preview portion of today's programming with a news of the day video. So we'll go ahead and split this up. I'll use timestamps on this one today. When it's 3 or less, I don't think it's a big deal because obviously the preview part's gonna be maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but in this case it might end up being a little bit longer. So we're gonna take a look at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. We got 2 games starting then. Buffalo and Washington. Now, Buffalo's won both of the first 2 meetings. They'll be looking to sweep the season series. These are both teams that find themselves 5 points out of the playoffs. So Buffalo won January 3rd by a score of 5-4 in overtime. February 26th, it was a 7-4 victory for the Sabres. Sabres are 4-5-1 in their last 10. So are Washington. 4-5-1 in their last 10. They're both 5 points behind the Islanders. They're both 2 points behind Florida, and they're both 1 point ahead of Ottawa. So they're in that perilous spot where whoever wins tonight, if they win in regulation, they have a better chance. But their chances really are going to be affected by what happens in this Islanders Anaheim game as well. But yeah, so for Buffalo, they're a good road team. That could help them. I like Buffalo's chances. Plus, they've already beaten Washington twice this year. And in the event that Ovechkin's not in the lineup for Washington, that will dramatically affect their chances as well. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, Colorado playing against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto won 6-2 on December 31st, made it look easy. Colorado 37-22-6 on the season. They're 6-3-1 over their last 10. They're 4 points back of Minnesota for second place in the division. They're 1 point ahead of the Winnipeg Jets. So they're sitting in third, but not comfortably in third. On the Toronto side, they're 40-18-8. They're 6-4 over their last 10. They're 2 points ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They do have 2 games in hand on the Tampa Bay Lightning, this being one of them. So, in the event that they win tonight, they're then 4 points up with just the 1 game in hand. But again, it really is in their hands, and I like their chances tonight against Colorado. That being said, Colorado may remember that 6-2 loss. They might rally around the fact Lekkonen's out for 4 to 6 weeks. It should be an interesting matchup to be sure. 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific start between the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues. So these teams have split the first 2 meetings. On December 31st, it's a 5-2 win for Minnesota. On January 8th, it was a 3-0 win for St. Louis. The fourth and final meeting between these teams will be April the 8th. Now, these teams are going in opposite directions. Minnesota is 7-0-3 in their last 10. They've got a 13-game point streak going. They're 3 points behind Dallas. They're 4 points ahead of Colorado. So, with a win tonight, they'd pull within 1 point of the Dallas Stars for first in the division yet again. 29-32-5 is the record for St. Louis over their last 10. They're 3-5-2. They've fallen 16 points behind the Winnipeg Jets for that last playoff spot. They're now tied with Vancouver. We will talk about Vancouver in a bit. But for St. Louis fans, it definitely looks like the odds of them drafting Bedard go up a little bit as this losing continues for St. Louis. So there's a positive to it, right? 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. I've got the Islanders in against the Anaheim Ducks. I don't have them. The Islanders are in against the Anaheim Ducks. I have no say in the matter. The Islanders won this one at home on October 15th, 7-1. So the No Mercy Magnets on the board. What's interesting is the hat and jersey combination is weird because the hat's the wrong color, which has me wondering. So whoever made the hat had the wrong color, or did the Islanders want to use their regular color for the reverse retro and then they changed their minds? It's one of those things that only I would wonder. So the Islanders 34-27-8 overall. Their last 10 games are 6-3-1. They're coming off that rough loss last night against the LA Kings. They're 2 points behind Pittsburgh, but they've played 2 more games. They're 3 points ahead of Florida, but they've played 2 more games. So this is a must-win for the Islanders. If they lose this one, especially in regulation, then you've got Florida with 3 games in hand and only 3 points back, and their odds get better. Anaheim 22-35-10 over their last 10 games. They're 5-2-3. They're 25 points behind Winnipeg. Not officially eliminated from the playoffs yet, though. So Anaheim's been playing spoiler well enough. We'll see if they can do it again tonight as the Islanders come in and try to get things in order after what had to be a frustrating loss last night. All right, over to the news of the day. And of course, as always, let me know your winners for these games in the comment section below. So, news of the day, the NHL's revealed some key dates. I don't understand why it takes this long, but it has. April 17th, the playoffs get started. So there you go. There's your date for the start of the playoffs. On May the 8th, the draft lottery will be held at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. Never understood why it takes this long to decide when the draft lottery is going to be either. I think that should be locked in the same as like the awards and everything else. I find it odd, but at any rate, so we know what date it's going to be now, and looking forward to watching that as always. June the 3rd, that's the planned date, the tentative start date for the Stanley Cup Finals. That, of course, can be pushed forward if the rounds before that get done earlier. And whenever I think about playoffs getting pushed forward because things are done early, I think of the 1995 playoffs where it felt like all the series had to be sweeps and they were in a hurry to go home. So, yeah, June 3rd is the scheduled likely start date, but it could go ahead before that. June 26th is the awards, so we'll have the Stanley Cup awarded before that, of course. June 28th and 29th is the draft from Nashville, and July the 1st, we have free agency getting started. So it's back on the date it should be. And this is always something that I enjoy about the NHL schedule this time of year. You have May draft lottery, so that's a big live stream on the channel. The draft, of course, is a huge one. I invite you all to join for that one. And, of course, free agency when things go kind of crazy. This year looks a little bit thinner when it comes to the when it comes to the free agent market. But, again, it'll change between now and July 1st. There will be restricted free agents who don't get qualified. And with everybody being up against the cap right now, there could be some surprises about who doesn't get a qualifying offer. So Gary Bettman was asked about the playoff format. I don't know what people expect him to say. So the playoff format became a divisional format in part because advertisers didn't like 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, and here's why. So you have the playoffs set up in such a way that you don't necessarily know who's facing who in the next round. And as a result, you can't really advertise that far ahead. They like knowing who's playing who in the next round. They like to be able to advertise the potential matchups, and they also really like rivalries. Rivalries sell. So what this does is it causes those rivalry matchups in the first and second round. At least that's the planned outcome, right? And it also means that you can plan ahead who's going to face who in each round of the playoffs. So while fans generally want 1 versus 8 back, advertisers really don't. Why would Bettman sit there and say, "Oh, I can't stand this format. This format sucks"? Why would he, like, even if he thought it, why would he say it? This is one of those things where, people get all mad at him like, "Oh, he's completely out of touch." But why would he want to make advertisers angry and potentially end up with backlash from owners or whoever because you went out there and said, "Yeah, this format's dumb, but it's not our call"? Like, it's just, he's not going to say that. And I don't think the format bothers him that much. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know there's a lot of people that it does bother. But yeah, so that's where we're at. I don't see the format changing. And I think it's going to stay the way that it is. And I think it's going to be a topic of conversation for however long it does stay in place. But I don't see it changing anytime soon, unless the NHLPA really wants it to change, which, again, I haven't heard that much from the NHLPA about being angry about the current format. So, yeah, when he says this is working well, I don't know what else people expect him to say. So, he's very rehearsed in the things that he says. I think he knows the questions he's going to get. He knows he's going to get asked about the format. And I think he's very practiced in his answers to questions about the format. All right. Craig Berube, set to reach a major milestone here, actually. He will become the 6th person to play 1,000 games in the National Hockey League and coach 500. So in this game tonight, I don't know if they're having a ceremony before that game. I haven't seen anything on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because that's a pretty major milestone right there. And with Berube, would I be surprised if he coaches 1,000 games for the Blues? Not really. Not really. He helped them get to the promised land and win a Stanley Cup in 2019. I think he's there as long as he wants to be there. So, kudos to Craig Berube for reaching that milestone. Hudobin's been called up by the Chicago Blackhawks. It'll be interesting to see if they give him some games and what happens. Hudobin, it has not been great the last times he was called up by the Dallas Stars before the trade. And when he cleared waivers, it didn't necessarily surprise me. It is another example, though, of when he was on waivers, or people like, "Oh, I hope my team claims him," where people will get enamored with a name. And the reality is, Hudobin right now is not the same goaltender he was in the 2020 playoffs. But I hope he comes in and plays well for Chicago if he gets a chance, because I like Hudobin. He's a really good guy, and I wish him well. Of course, just an update on yesterday's news of the day. Andrei Svechnikov is out for the season. He is having knee surgery, so it is a worst case scenario. The key now is to make sure that he's ready for training camp and for the start of next season, which shouldn't be a problem. I don't think. I haven't seen anything saying that should be a problem. But yeah, so he's out for the rest of the season. They did get the win last night over Winnipeg. We'll see if they can build some momentum. And one thing is, if you rally around an injured teammate, it can work. Not that long ago, Tampa Bay showed us that with Steven Stamkos. So you can make that work. So last night, too, San Jose, a first. They are the first National Hockey League team officially eliminated from the playoffs with that overtime loss against the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, of course, there's articles on how they missed the playoffs. I won't be doing a video on how they missed the playoffs until the season's done. To me, it seems kind of silly to do that because you can't do the full autopsy on the season until it's officially done. And so, yeah, it's not really a surprise. Probably by this time next week, we'll be talking about Anaheim, Chicago, Columbus. Those are just the next three that I would think are up for official elimination from the playoffs. But for San Jose, it's a rebuild. I hope they do this right and don't try to rush the turnaround. But again, not every team commits to that long-term rebuild. Speaking of teams in a long-term rebuild, Ottawa's has gotten longer. So they were outscored 25-11 on the 1-4 road trip. I talked about when I did the video on the Eastern teams before March started that road trip would be big because Ottawa's road record wasn't very good. I didn't expect that kind of a road trip. So it's a rough one, and now they come home and they play Colorado and Toronto. And then they go out on the road and they play Pittsburgh and Boston. Now, last night Boston lost against Chicago. I think Boston's going to be a little easier to beat the rest of the way. But the Avs and the Leafs have a lot to play for, and so does Pittsburgh. So at least for the next 3 games, Ottawa's going to be playing against teams that I wouldn't say desperate hockey is going to be getting played by Toronto, but they're going to want to beat Ottawa. That's just how that's going to work. Toronto, Ottawa, that's a rivalry that goes back a long way. And yeah, we'll see how Ottawa responds, what the offseason plans become, if Pierre Dorion changes any of his plans. Also, Gary Bettman, when asked about the sale for the Sens, says it should be done within weeks. So we're not looking at a long-term who's going to be the owner. It's going to be a matter of weeks, and then we'll know who the owners are, and the Sens organization can move forward from that point. So with last night's win over Dallas, Vancouver's won 5 in a row. Now, there's some local media saying it's the bounce you get with a new coach, and there is something to that. Like Bruce Boudreau last year, after he took over the Canucks record, was fantastic. And it was great. And now, did they have great structure? No. Did they win a bunch of games? Yeah. Did they almost make the playoffs? Absolutely. So I'm not getting too excited about the winning streak, but it's enjoyable. I'm just basically ignoring this year's draft right now and enjoying the fact they've won 5 in a row. Miller's playing better. Besser's playing well. And the funny thing, of course, with Besser is that the drawback will be, well, he's not scoring enough goals. I'm not going to argue he's not scoring. I'm not going to argue that he is scoring enough goals because he's not. But he's playing better, and Demko's back to being Demko. So there's a lot of hope for next year, but I had a lot of hope going into this season as well. So definitely muted enthusiasm on my part. I'm not cautiously optimistic at this point. I was cautiously optimistic for years. That has changed. So we'll see how things go. But the nice thing about this 5-game winning streak is it includes wins over teams like Toronto and like Dallas. So it's not like they're just beating the Ducks and the Coyotes and they're not playing anybody. But again, it is easier to get up for these games when the pressure's not there. And I don't think the Canucks have that pressure. And Tocchet has definitely brought about a different system on the ice, which guys like Phil DiGiuseppe seem to fit in really well with. So, we'll see how far the Canucks can go with this, how far up the standings they end up going. We know they aren't going to make the playoffs, but how many points do they end up with? And then what does the projection become for next season? Because they still need to get under the salary cap for next season. Yeah, the mess isn't done yet. So Vegas comes home off their road trip pretty happy. They get 8 points out of a possible 10 by winning 4 out of 5. They've won 7 out of 8 in the month of March. Vegas is getting hot at the right time. Now there are exceptions to this, but usually teams that do well in the playoffs are teams that play really well in March and April. If you're and that seems really simple, but when we get into playoff matchups, we're gonna have matchups between teams that have similar records, but one's playing really well and one wasn't playing really well going to the playoffs. And then people will argue, well, the regular season that's all by the wayside now, so it's a fresh start. It isn't always. The team with the momentum going into the playoffs can just have that roll through the playoffs. One example would be the St. Louis Blues back in 2019, where they had an excellent second half of the season, obviously because they were last in the league. But what kind of gets lost in that is it's another example of how a team that's hot going into the playoffs can stay hot and can ride that to the Stanley Cup. So we'll see if Vegas is able to ride that. You've got to think they'll be the favorite to come out of the Pacific, and may very well be the favorite to come out of the West altogether. And then the question becomes, if they are the team coming out of the West, can they stop whoever comes out of the East? So last night, Leon Draisaitl joined a pretty small group of players, and this is a pretty fun accomplishment for him. He reaches the 100-point mark for the fourth time in his career. What I find interesting too is that with Draisaitl and McDavid both, when they reach 100 points, it's sort of that's nice, and we don't really even pay all that much attention to it, which tells you what kind of an elite level they're at right now. But he is the sixth guy born outside North America to reach 100 points for the fourth time. Peter Stastny had 7 seasons with 100 points plus. Jari Kurri, 6. Jaromir Jagr, 5. Teemu Selanne had 4, and Alex Ovechkin with 4. I'm actually kind of surprised with Ovechkin with 4 because I consider him to be a guy who gets goals, hasn't always had the assists. So he may get 50 goals, may get 35, 40 assists. But yeah, so pretty heady company that he's in there. Let me double check here. Yeah, all of those are Hall of Fame level players. And I have to say level because Yager's still playing hockey. He hasn't retired from the NHL, so he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. And Ovechkin, of course, still in the NHL. But I think he's going to reach the Hall of Fame as well. So yeah, for Leon Draisaitl, he's in some pretty special company there. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.